So you're not getting any snow at all, Tony?
No, we're not going to get any snow this year at all.
Because I know they're getting some in Virginia.
They forecasted 1 inch of snow here, and I think we're up to like 10 inches where I am.
Well, they just were off by 1-0.
Magnitude of 10, order of 10. Yeah.
But decimals are important.
Yeah.
That's why more people need to take Intro to Rock with Pat and not Intro to Rock with me.
Yeah. Well, the groundhog saw a shadow, did not see a shadow, so no snow in North Carolina. Good for me.
What's his name again?
Punxsutawney Phil.
Thank you.
I did hear there was one more day of winter this year.
it was yesterday, or it's
February 29th.
When is it? February 29th. I for some reason I thought it was already the end of February. I wish.
All sorts of weird things. By the way, did you hear they moved the starting time for the Cleveland Guardians home opener back an hour because of the eclipse?
Yeah, we were looking into doing that, but then we thought here in Ohio, we're gonna get the totality of the eclipse, and so we were looking at different things to do. And we looked at going to the Guardians game, and both my husband's mom and my parents live in totality too. And we live in a development and have like a quarter of an acre, but the people behind us have 5 acres. So I was just gonna reach out to them and be like, can we use a little corner of your yard? So we have kind of different plans for depending on what the weather is like, because both of our boys are out of school for that day. They canceled. And I heard it was because so many people had already called in to cancel.
Yeah, I think they're doing a teacher's work day where Diana is at Westerville, so the students are out. But you're probably at about 98% totality where you are, and I think we're about 95 because we're a bit further.
I was under the assumption that all major league stadiums had lights now.
I don't think it was so much that. It was like the traffic that's going to be from people getting there early and everything like that.
They can still play the game. They can turn the lights on. They don't have to care about it being darker out.
As a Tampa native, I was under the assumption that nobody went to baseball games.
I'm going to a Red Sox game this summer.
Oh, that'd be cool.
I'm totally psyched about it. Yeah.
In Fenway?
Yeah.
It's
a lot of good food around it. A lot of good food.
It's an interesting stadium. The whole layout is just so different than any place else.
It's like that and Wrigley are the only two like old-timey stadiums.
I think so.
Yeah, around anymore. Yeah.
So how about that brass band?
What?
Yeah, so far we've yet to talk about brass band. So I see that you're wearing that. You're wearing your NABBA shirt.
I am, and I have guinea pig hairs all over the NABBA hoodie. That's the problem with them having a black hoodie. Because they held the pigs this morning and they're partially white, so
Well, that's a good segue into introducing our guest, Patrick Herak, who is the current president of the North American Brass Band Association, and we're going to talk about anything we can talk about North American Brass Band Association and beyond. So thanks for being with us, Patrick.
Happy to be here.
So here's what I want. Somebody define what this event is.
Which
event?
Brass Band
the North American Brass Band Championships that we call NABBA. That does have the abbreviation that we call the event does not even have a C in it.
Yeah, it's NABBIC.
BBC, yeah.
But then you couldn't do Nabba Dabba Do.
You could not. NABBIC Abba Do.
NABBA
doesn't ring. It doesn't work.
It doesn't have the same ring. Yeah.
Well, there's, I think, multiple parts to it. It starts off with a solo and ensemble contest on the Friday morning. So, variety of youth solos, 10 pieces, brass ensembles, percussion soloists. And I guess to start off the night before is typically a NABBA board meeting where we get together for our official annual meeting that's in person. And then the band contest is the next 2 days. and bands play a set piece in an own choice part of the program. Some of the sections are split between the 2 days, so that they'll play the set piece on the Friday and then the own choice portion on the Saturday. And for the own choice portion, just so you know, it doesn't have to be a single test piece. You can do multiple pieces if you want, as long as it stays within the time limit. And it usually, in the past, there had been a gala concert, but I think with championship section bands playing their own choice piece on the Saturday evening, they're playing at such a high level, it's difficult to find a gala band that could perform at that level. And so that's been kind of the top entertainment. And we do the solo awards on the Friday evening and the band awards on the Saturday evening. And that's kind of part of the weekend. There's an exhibitor area where people can try out instruments and mouthpieces. And we also sometimes have clinics in there. I believe we have a couple clinicians this year, and I know the University of Toronto will be doing a little presentation about their university, and for people that want to attend there. We're still hoping to maybe get a few other universities to participate. But it's really, I think, a lot of chance for just bands, people from across North America to join together. Still haven't gotten any bands from Belize yet. That is part of North America. But and then this year with things in Huntsville, I don't think we have any Canadian bands. The main representation is University of Toronto, I think, with their booth. But
I've always loved that. I always loved back in the day when they did the gala concert. It's just like, wow, what a culmination. And they always had some really good, fun bands to listen to. But, there were 20 bands at NABBA then. I think the biggest obstacle to a gala concert is just time in the schedule. Like the only time in the schedule we could do it would be Sunday. And, everybody uses that as a travel day to get home from NABBA. So it doesn't, it'd be really, really tricky. I can't figure out in my head logistically how to actually make a gala concert happen.
But I think in Fort Wayne, the championship section own choice was on the Sunday one time, and there was almost no audience because almost all the bands had left.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too is even just looking forward to Fort Wayne next year. There are 3 venues in Fort Wayne we could use, and I think that's something we may have to consider, because how many bands do we have at NABBA this year? Tony's at 39.
We have the largest attendance ever, 39 bands.
Yeah, and I can imagine in Fort Wayne, especially with some of the new bands that have popped up in the Michigan area, the bands from Canada, if you get 50 bands scheduling wise with 2 venues, that might be a bit of a challenge, because we're a little tight this year, aren't we?
It's not. We have some capacity, but it just depends on where they line up. With 14 bands in the second section, that's using up quite a bit of hall space. But if we added 3 more bands in the first section, 3 more bands in the championship section, then we would not be able to, under our current formula, we would not be able to fit them all in one hall in the same day for the Saturday. So we would just have to reimagine the hall usage. It would get tricky.
Well, let's talk about that for a second too. 14 bands in the second section. I think a lot of times the growth of brass banding is measuring by how do the top bands do. But 14 bands in one section, that's definitely more than Wales, probably more than the northeast of England, or North England, probably more than Scotland. That's just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, the last time we had our largest attendance, which was 2019, we had 38 bands, and there were 12 bands in the second section. So we've topped that this year in both ways, but it is really an indicator that the second section is where the bulk of American British style brass bands are at right now. That's the level that most bands tend to be in.
Yeah, I kind of equate it to like college football, right? Because we all, we get really excited about like what is going on with the championship section and all those bands that have been established up there. And I might get shot by some people for this opinion, but like as somebody who graduated from an SEC school, the SEC football is not a lot of fun to watch. There's like 2 teams that are really going at it and then the rest. But the Sun Belt is a whole heck of a lot of fun, and it's way more competitive. And I would say, like, in terms of the entertainment value, the first section is terrifyingly entertaining every year because of how well those bands just play and are like so close to each other in an ability level. that I think if you're just like, oh, if like you have the mindset of like, oh, the championship section is all the like the only one that's going to be a worth an entertainment value, you are so wrong in that.
I think the other thing I would argue too is that some of the best literature is in the first section.
Yeah.
I know I sit in occasionally on like the test piece selection uh, meetings and look at what they have there, and it's like the list of first section pieces to choose from is, I think, by far the biggest list out of any section. And then there's just so much fun stuff in there. And even when you start to look at like pieces from underrepresented composers, there's more first section pieces than anything else.
Yeah, and the second section repertoire is probably some of the more challenging to select because of just trying to get it to fit into that level of band right there, and the music is usually too hard or too easy, and it's right in that on that line where you have to filter it in there. And I also think that the second section bands are all more evenly comparable to each other in skill and skill level. Like I like the championship section. I think there's a greater gap between first and seventh place than there will be in the second section, where there's the gap between first and 14th place. It's going to be a real challenge to judge that.
I do think just for somebody who runs and organizes one of the second section bands, I do think Albanus hit it out of the park. I think that is that hits in the perfect spot. Albanus variations. I like it. We
really
literally
cool.
we cite Reddit when we cite Reddit, everybody was like, "This is so much more easier and approachable than Hope was, but it's not quite as easy and like Salvation Army, sorry, like Podunky, ho hummy as the Purcell." So like everybody's really jazzed about this one. I think they nailed it with this one.
Yeah, I in retrospect, Hope is really a first section piece. It's not really a second section piece, and that's one of the things that I've been kind of working really hard with in the music committee, is to make sure that the second and the third section pieces are appropriately leveled. Because even the year we did Hope, we did Apenos by Joel Collier as the third section piece, and that piece was too hard for the third section. If you were coming from the perspective of a new band that was going to NABBA for the first time and you're entering the third section, you would have to have an incredibly good E flat soprano player to play Apenos. Most third section bands that just will struggle to find a player of that caliber. You needed a championship or first section level E flat stop player. So we worked really hard to make sure that the third section is easier and more approachable for entry level bands and inexperienced bands. And the second kind of, then you have the first section where it's almost championship. It's 25 years ago championship level music, which where the bands are there. And then the second section equally distributed in the middle of those two, and that's what we worked really hard. And we did that. I thought the personal variations helped us with that a lot. And Albanus also really put it in the same area for that. So the levels are really evened out now.
So a few weeks ago, Foden's played Hope on the Friday night at the RNCM Festival of Brass. And I was talking to some of them afterwards because there was another piece I thought might be a good lower section test piece. And they said, what about, Hope for, I think, the first section? I was like, well, that was our second section test piece last year. And they're like, well, how did that go?
Well,
said,
if you look at like the notes and rhythms, it doesn't look like it's that hard of a piece, but conceptually and like putting it together, it's one of those pieces. So like putting it together is actually the bitch of the situation. That's really where it's hard.
Yeah, I liken it to the Von Williams tuba concerto. Like you look at it and you're like, this isn't that hard. Most tuba players can play it. Even good high schoolers can play it. But have you ever heard anybody perform it and nail it? For some reason, it just seems to there's always pitfalls in there that makes it just really hard to put it all together, and I think Hope was like that.
And that's what sometimes makes the best test pieces is, yeah, you can play it, but can you make music out of it? And
yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah. So that's going to be that we are going to make sure that we level set the pieces in the right place. I think we have a really good lineup this year for that, with the new St. James piece by Philip Harper, and
Other Lives. Is it?
Yeah, Other Lives. Other Lives is, wow, what a spectacular piece that is. that Friday night listening of 7 or 8 of those in a row is going to be, that's good listening right there.
I'm afraid to say this with a past NABBA president and the current NABBA president, but I think that St. James and Hope are are pretty much the same level.
Yeah.
St. James, I think the challenge in first section is going to be who I think that the first section bands are probably going to be able to play it really well, and it's just going to be who can elevate it to the next level, because everyone is going to be able to play it. It's easier than last year for sure.
Well, yeah, Year of the Dragon is
Year of the Dragon. Yeah. So it's a little bit, it was funny after Year of the Dragon and then getting our test piece this year. And it was like, oh, we can do this.
Yeah. Year of the Dragon was interesting because it was one of those things that an opportunity that you just couldn't pass up.
Yeah.
Because nobody has performed it at NABBA in 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it met our qualifications for being selected as a test piece. And the last time it was used as a test piece in any competition was like, what, 1992 or something? I think, it's like everybody loves this piece and everybody plays it, but only choice selections get to use it. Mm-hmm. So you can't use it as a test piece. And it's like, well, we can use it as a test piece now. So it's, well, okay. It's, there are elements of it that are championship section and there are elements of it that are second section, and it's another one that kind of fits on the line there. Mm-hmm. So it's either too hard or it's either too easy, and it's not completely, on that level like St. James is, but it was too good to pass up. We had to do it.
Tony,
so the bands had to suffer through it.
Do you think that's a challenge with the test piece selection committee, that as we get more bands at NABBA, that means, say there's 8 bands in a section, that means there's been 32 own choice test pieces over the past 4 years, which really, takes away possibilities for what can be the set piece. Or if there's 14 and 12 sections in 12 bands in a section, you start to get up to, I know there's repeats, but
that's the repeat element is the thing that, you think you could potentially have 32, but from year to year, like somebody plays Kingdom of Dragons this year, someone's going to play it next year. 3 bands played Patriots last year, 2 bands are playing it this year. So it doesn't, the same pieces get used all the time, especially if they're successful. If people are winning with those pieces, another band's going to use it. Kingdom of Dragons is one of those pieces that people win when they play that piece. It's a winner type of test piece that people use as a choice piece.
I mean, it's like a lot of us who are, the artistic directors or music directors of some of these bands, especially on the lower section bands, the seconds and thirds, the easiest thing to do is like, okay, so how do I figure, because we have the same problems that the selection committee has for finding a test piece, is like, what does fit us, and so we go to brass band results and see what they've been doing in those exact sections in Europe. Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of bands, that's kind of the first stop for that.
Yeah,
to find that out.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And, the interesting thing about how this all plays out in the changing landscape of NABBA is when we had to play your choice piece and your test piece in the same program, the selection of the choice piece to complement the test piece was very important. And I don't know how many artistic directors really understood that when the human brain processes an entire performance for a score, the things had to be cohesive. Like if you took the judge on a musical journey throughout those 2 pieces, it probably had a better effect on where you placed. But now, since you perform them on separate days, that's irrelevant. It has no bearing on what you select as a choice piece. All you have to do is pick a piece that's good for your band. It doesn't have to complement the other piece, which is another interesting element to it. Is like, well, now we can do anything. And because you're playing it on 2 separate days, you don't have to plan something that's going to work within your band's endurance level. You don't have to play a 30-minute performance. You only have to play a 15-minute performance. So it's changing the landscape and how things get selected for the bands.
And I do think the endurance not being a factor may, I don't know the best way to say this, but may make it more difficult to see which is the better band, so to speak. But you get much more enjoyable performances to listen to because the bands are fresh for both pieces.
Yes, yeah, the performances are going to be better, and I don't think it's a bad thing to make it harder on the judges. Because that's kind of the point is we want the bands to grow and get better. So yeah, make it tough on the judges, make it challenging for them to pick a winner. You know.
So for those who, that very small amount of people who are listening to this who don't know, how many sections are there of bands in the competition?
We have championship, first, second, third. Then there's an open section, which is typically for new bands. How many years can you do the open section? Is it only 2 years or three? Maybe?
I don't think there's any limit on that.
I thought there might have been.
I don't recall there being a rule that there's a limit on that.
But
there's section, hardly ever a band in that section.
Yeah, open section bands can use trumpets and French horns, I believe, still too, correct?
Yeah, it's an introductory section, and I think that the effect of it is that when you bring your band there and you're playing on trumpets and French horns and you see all these people that are playing on cornets and tenor horns, it's going to be a lot of like, man, we need to get those, because it really makes a big difference.
And I'm sure the vendors appreciate that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Come here and play in this and then buy all of our horns. And then we have 3 youth sections as well. We have a youth championship, a youth first, and a youth open, which is similar. The youth open is similar to the adult open section.
What technically constitutes a youth ensemble? Is it just 18 under?
Yeah, it's high school, secondary school and under. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting because NABBA has always defined the youth section in that way, but in the reality of things, a lot of people who form youth bands, they cross mix college students and high school students, which kind of changes, or creates, a decision they have to make on whether they go to NABBA for the competition or what category they're in. Forces some of them into the third section. It could push some of them into the open section.
That's something we've talked about with the Dublin Festival of Brass, because with the Dublin Youth Brass Band, the Oakland Youth Brass Band, the Motor City Youth Brass Band, in the area, we want to encourage the groups to come, but yet we still want to have some fairness in the competition. And I don't know that we've quite settled on what it'll be yet, because we've only had one youth band at a time each year. But I think kind of looking at maybe like the Olympic soccer model, where you can have, what did they do? It's U19, but you can have 5 players that are above that or something like that, that are U21 or something. I can't remember the exact rules, but something along those lines, where we say, yeah, the base of it has to be high school and lower, but you could have up to 5 college students or something like that. Might be a way to go for the regional events. But I do think for the North American Championships, keeping it 18 and under makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, I think it's really about what people define it as. A lot of people would say, we're going to use college kids and we're going to create a youth band and then allow high school kids in it. So it's not necessarily a youth band in the way that NABBA defines it, but they consider it a youth band because they're considering college kids in the youth category.
But then you have, Georgia and James Madison coming in and being very competitive in their respective sections, and that's not a youth section at all. Muddying up that water,
Yeah, I think that, you're talking about definitions, not skill level. I think it's very clear. You have to be very clear about that, is that, we're just talking about, defining what they can be so you can ensure competitive evenness. And I do also believe, as someone who has a lot of experience with youth bands, that there is a clear difference between high school players and college players, without a doubt. And I think that when you're talking about a competitive arena, I don't think it's all that great to combine the two. You shouldn't have college kids competing against high school kids the same way you shouldn't have championship section players competing against second section players with the shared player role. You have to ensure competitive fairness by making sure that the appropriate people are competing against the appropriate people.
And I think that's one of the kind of conundrums you have sometimes, is you want to have competitive fairness, yet we want to grow the brass band movement as much as possible. Like in Norway, you can play in the elite band, but you can also play in your town band. And they can share players because maybe this one town doesn't have enough players. So they put out an all call and then they fill it in with the thought that, well, if your band's rehearsing every night the week before the contest, you can't rehearse with two bands every night the week before the contest. And I I don't know the answer to it. And I think we're going to keep swinging back and forth on this pendulum a little bit. But hopefully we get to a point where, things just keep growing and everybody feels like it's fair.
Yeah, I also believe that, NABBA is growing and growing quickly, but not as fast as it would if the country were smaller, if North America was smaller. Our biggest obstacle is going to always be geography.
I do think, though, it helps a great deal to now have a festival in Toronto, two in the Columbus area, one in St. Louis, one in Texas that's growing,
One
one
in
in
Kansas
Iowa
City.
that's growing, Kansas City. There'll be one in Huntsville, I believe, next year.
Yeah,
I think
yeah, there.
that can help keep the inertia going. Especially like if you think of Huntsville, that'll keep the inertia going for all the bands that have started to pop up from the South that have never been to NABBA until the past three contests.
Right. And if they can't make it all the way up to Fort Wayne, they'll have something there that they can still participate in.
Oh yeah,
And that's been a big focus of ours for the last several years, Pat, is to try to extend the landscape or access for bands to go to, some sort of brass band event within a reasonable driving distance. We still have to figure out the California thing, which we've worked on, and just some things that didn't really work out to make it happen, but it's still on the planning.
Well, doesn't
side
San
of things to
Francisco
get.
doesn't San Francisco host an event?
not yet.
We not yet, but someday we hope to. But they make the effort to go to the championships, which is probably the most massive commitment from any band to go to the championship.
I talked to Jacob, and holy cow, the commitment. They have someone drive across the country every year, and it's
With
what,
the
like
equipment truck, yeah.
yeah, it's like a 3-day drive. So before they even get to NABBA, they've been driving for 3 days across the country, and then they compete at NABBA and then drive back. 3 days, like hotels,
And this is a volunteer group too. They're not
yes.
getting paid to drive. Like when Ohio State goes to the Rose Bowl, they have a truck that drives, things out west.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. It's and there are a lot of bands that take on significant challenges like that with 1,000 fewer miles.
Yeah.
Oh, also, I forgot Detroit, Gettysburg, and where would you say Mid Atlantic is, Amy? Philadelphia-ish?
It's at Rowan University, which is in Glassboro. It's about 25 minutes outside of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's lots of brass band events to choose to go to.
Well, and going back to the youth brass band and stuff like that, and using these regional events. I mean, I know that the Atlantic Youth Brass Band participated in Mid Atlantic Brass Band Festival, and I think I saw that the Rowan University Brass Band also participated. These regional events are great for bands like that to remain involved. And the Dublin Youth Brass Band will be playing at Dublin Festival Brass, as we're building up to hopefully go to NABBA someday. But yeah.
Yeah. So Pat, we'll step away from that a little bit, and I want you to talk a little bit about your trip to the United Kingdom last month to Royal Northern Festival of Brass.
Yeah, so I went to the RNCM Festival of Brass, which if you've never been, it's just an amazing weekend across the board. Like Friday night was Foden's, Saturday, Tredegar, I think, Black Dyke, Trezetois from Switzerland. Sunday was Corey and Brighouse and the RNCM band, as well as some other small groups in there. The junior RNCM band played. I think the nice thing about it too is if you didn't get to the British Open or the European Championships or the Nationals, all those test pieces get played there. Some of the concerts are only about an hour. Some are, maybe 50 minutes, interval 50 minutes. There's solos, there's new premieres. Dave Thornton has now coined it the RNCM International Festival of Brass. So there's a lot more emphasis on international music and composers. And Dorothy Gates was one of the featured composers for the weekend. I was part of the international, I suppose, because there was a panel discussion on the future of brass band repertoire and increasing diverse society. And so that was an exciting panel to be on with Sandy Smith and
Can we talk about that a little bit?
Andrea
What
Price.
was that panel like? Like, how did they do that?
Well, Kenny Crookston was kind of the moderator for the panel, throwing out some questions. And, some of the things they came up with is why is it so hard for to have test pieces written by women was one thing, because women typically don't write test pieces. And that's came up in the discussion. How can we reach a wider audience? And one of the things that came up was the Elevate program that they're doing through, I think it's Brass Band England, it might be. And is it Freckleton Band? I think that's involved with that. But they're basically teaming up the brass band music with a drag show in Blackpool. And if you've not been to Blackpool, it's an interesting part on the west coast of the north of England. And it's just a way to reach a different audience and to create a safe space for LGBTQ plus people, some of which are band members, other that are just in the community, to introduce them to brass bands. And so just thinking about some of these different variety of events where brass bands can get exposure. I know, Amy, every year you play at the Dublin Irish Festival with the Dublin Silver Band, and I'm guessing for a lot of people, that's probably either the first time they've heard a brass band or the only brass band they've ever heard, because they go every year. So how do we reach out in partnership and get involved and reach out to new audiences and bring in more people to the brass band community? Sometimes it's easy to just play the traditional concert in the park, which is geared towards a traditional, more nostalgic audience. But once again, every tradition was once an innovation. So
Did they talk at all about United Kingdom's test piece selections and the diversity that they have in that selection process?
I don't know that there's much diversity in the selection process, just because of what they have. Sandy Smith was on the panel, and he's one of the people on the test piece selection committee. And I think one of the things that came out of it is they actually have, I think, composers submit pieces to be selected for the test piece. We at NABBA did a survey and just asked from anybody, especially those from underrepresented groups. And I think we got 2 test piece selections from Hannaford Publishing from female composers, and everything else was, as you can imagine, the other 40 pieces or so that were sent were not from underrepresented groups. But the one problem Sandy said is that there's certain criteria that just aren't being met by the submissions. And I think transparency with what that criteria is, or having mentors, could really help, because some of them, they just get it and it's like, that can never be a test piece, or it won't fit into categories. And I don't know what the rubric and scoring system is for what sections, like, maybe for third section or fourth section, it's like you can't have more than a euphonium, flugel, or solo cornet solo. I have no idea. But as you go up, you want to have each section featured or each soloist featured to help separate bands. I'm not sure what that criteria is. It'd be interesting to have more of a dialogue with the people on their committee there and see if we can maybe be more transparent in, this is what makes a championship section piece, this is what makes the first section piece, things like that. And then that can also help composers that aspire to write for those sections know what the rubric is, so that they can try to match it.
Yeah. Was there any discussion about the process that they use to select the pieces, and maybe, the process that they're using is making it less effective to find pieces from underrepresented people?
I think it's probably just more the transparency of, like, the format that the submission needs to be, what the piece, those requirements for the piece for each section, I think, is probably more.
I think it's interesting that they're like submitting.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that, we don't necessarily have a submission process, but we go out and search for pieces, and we've been able to find now some of the pieces we have found don't meet the criteria like they're talking about, and we had to eliminate them for that. We found a couple of really good pieces from some Canadian female composers, that didn't have the time limit met. They didn't have the feature the solos, and but they were wonderful pieces of music. They just weren't, competition pieces, as they would say. But we've been actively searching for these things. And if you just wait for people to send in submissions, is that the best way, versus, actively trying to figure out what is out there and finding them, because they may not know how to find us, or they may not even realize that it's something that could be possible for them. So, was there? Well, I guess I'm asking is, did they have any discussion about that? Is the process that they're using helping their mission for diversity?
Well, I would say two things. First of all, that's part of the reason why I went to the Festival of Brass, was to seek out some of those potential test pieces. And I think I found one that might be good for a lower section that, I put in the pot there from, I think it was an Argentinian composer, which I thought was kind of neat.
Yeah.
But also, to be fair, I was like jet lagged, things would pop up during this discussion and my mind would just start to wander and run with that for a little bit. So I don't know that if I was in the audience, I might have had a better focus to answer your question, Tony, but I'm not sure I have all the details of their process. I only have what I heard and what I remember, because like I said, just being in a room with some of those people and knowing who's in the room watching us can be a little bit nerve-wracking at the same time. So I'm not 100% confident on all the details I just gave. That's just my recollection of it. So
I think we should do some sort of mentorship program through NABBA, where like we find up and coming composers who have that potential and somehow get them to NABBA so they can watch the bands play. They can kind of get in their minds better what a test piece is after hearing several test pieces, and support more composers, because I feel like being in brass banding up for a certain amount of years, I see the same composers over and over and over, and it's so refreshing to have a different composer to play where I can't predict what I'm going to see in the compositional style.
And what would change this, like, very quickly, is if somebody picked a piece that nobody knew and it won. That, like, it is at the end of the day, it's a competitive activity, so people are going to gravitate towards things that are successful, and we need somebody to win with something, that's like, wow, we need to play that now, and that'll turn things around.
We commissioned our own choice, and we're terrified. It's not because we're afraid of the piece. We're afraid it's because it's not a Spark or a Harper or whatever, that the judges aren't going to know what to do with it.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I will say is that with our adjudication orientations, there is no criteria for using pieces that have been used before. That is not a consideration that the judges are going to be. They're going to be studying the scores and are going to be taking what they hear on its own merits. Okay. So, theoretically, it shouldn't be a problem, but it'll be interesting to see if it is.
It's more the tonal language that composers use, especially if they were not, because a lot of the composers who we adore in brass band land were born and raised in the system. They probably were not compositionally trained outside of brass band, and they came up in brass band. They talk in brass band, and you keep in mind, if you go into like American graduate school orchestration classes, they don't even mention the euphonium at all.
Yeah.
Much less cornet, tenor horn, E flat tuba, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And so that's the terrifying. It's not that, but it's like, it's also not a theme and variations with a bunch of solos, like, which is what a lot of, especially the second and first section pieces can become. And it's not what they're going to be expecting. And so I think that's the more scary thing. But also, if we don't do it, we're not pushing the medium forward. So, and I care as the artistic director who pushed this whole thing forward. I care more about doing that than necessarily winning. And putting that in there, and also it's a composer who's under 60 years old as well, like making that happen too.
Yeah. Right, well, the other thing that we talk about a lot is to make sure that the adjudicators understand that this is an art contest. It's not, is necessarily just, are they playing this piece the way the brass band composer who wrote it needs it to be played? Which is, we want the judges to go in there saying, you have a blank screen and you have to take what they present and what, how well they're doing. Excuse me. How well are they doing it? And are the decisions that they make artistically valuable and speak to the emotions of the listener, regardless of whether or not it's the exact tempo that's marked in the score, or they took the rallentando, precisely as the composer intended it in the score, but did they do something that moved you, and and not just like, this is a cookie cutter version of Laudate Dominum, and they played it the same way that everybody played it, and it's an academic exercise that they put it all in the box and do it all that. And we don't want that at our championships. We want to really push the medium in an artistic way. So, so we talked to the judges about being open to that aspect of it.
I remember talking to one judge who said something like some of the like high school bands in Texas play so well that they take the music out of the music. If that makes sense. I
don't know. We could have a forever discussion about this, because there's an element of it that if you don't play it well, you can't realize the score anyway. So you have to play a certain level of perfection before you can even begin to pull the music out of it. But I don't know.
Their jobs are not jobs I envy. That's for sure.
Yeah,
I do not envy their jobs.
Yeah, I
just to make everybody, because like if you judge, let's say you judge a section, you'll have like 1 to maybe 3 bands happy with what you said, and then everybody else hates you. like instantly.
I think it's also a matter of perspective, because when you sit there and you listen to 20 high school bands that all play so well, that you're like, well, wait a minute, none of these are standing out because they're all playing so well, and they get numb to the fact that, well, maybe they're not making it well, but they're kids, and kids inherently, if you have the right circumstances with the director, they're really easy to pull passion out of. They're young, and their emotions aren't dead from life and experiences that they actually can play with a lot. I mean, have you ever not heard the JMU brass band and not been like, oh my God, those kids are just killing it up there? Like the excitement and the enthusiasm that they put into their playing. And, the Watson brass band, it's the same thing. Those kids put everything they have into it. So I think it's just a matter of perspective in there. I think, but once you have a level of proficiency in the sonority and the technical achievements of the bands, then you can really start to see, okay, now what are they doing artistically with it?
I mean, it's been a very long time. It's been a very long time since I heard a performance I didn't enjoy at NABBA. No matter where their placing ended up. There were decisions made that, like, I was like, oh, okay, whatever, one way or the other. But like, it's very rare that I'm like sitting there going, nah, they're not good. It's like, oh, well, they didn't get that ready to go, and maybe I've been lucky and missed a bunch. You physically cannot make it to every performance. There's too many bands,
and 2 venues. Yeah. And I think I just live for those moments where, and oftentimes I'll be backstage listening, just because of the duties we have with NABBA, where there's just like that full brass band sound that makes it feel like you're stepping into a hot tub, that just warmth that just grabs you. Those are some of my favorite moments. And it can be in soft spots, it can be in loud spots, but it's just that, like it just fills the room and you just feel warm and cuddly like a big blanket or something. I don't know.
It was funny when you're doing the offstage interviews last year and being behind the percussion section. I knew the pieces were about to end because I started to feel it. And he's like, oh, timpani's gone. Here we go.
Yeah, that stage floor in the concert hall there in Huntsville, it does rattle a little bit, doesn't it?
Well, especially yeah.
Going back
and I'll never forget Found City they come back there after they do their own choice, and we were all just like so in awe about how hard they hit the two bells. And I'll never forget the director comes off and we're like, "How'd you get him to do that?" And he said, "I told him to hit it and not miss."
I'm going to say, going back to the repertoire thing, though, getting the music out there, one way is that for bands to win with those pieces. But I'm really excited next year that on our YouTube channel will be whatever 7, 8, 9 recordings of Lucy Pankhurst's piece, so that bands will get to hear that. And I think exposure that way helps as well. Because a lot of times when bands are looking at test pieces, you can look at the score, but they'll go, "Oh, is it on YouTube? Is there a recording?" I think very rarely do bands just go, "Oh, there's the score, let's do it."
Yeah, I also think that's another thing that NABBA is doing that's probably going to be good in the long run, is putting all of our music on YouTube for free. So there's tons of access and exposure for all those bands.
Yeah, we'll have to definitely relook at the metrics after this year's contest and see, how many of those views are from overseas. How many are from what cities in the US or states are we getting views from that aren't represented by bands that attend contests? And that might be a place to start reaching out to some more as well.
Yeah, for sure.
I think also go back to music when you talked about collaboration, Amy.
Yeah.
One of the things I've noticed in pop music is since about maybe 2004, 2005, how many songs that make it in the charts are so-and-so featuring so-and-so? We just don't see pieces that are co-composed. We see arranged by, but we don't see things where people have collaborated very much together. And I think that mentor thing could help there. And in fact, at the end of the session, they said, if you could have a brass band piece written by any composer, living or dead, who would you pick? And I said, any brass band composer and Taylor Swift, because I know it'll hit a new audience.
That would be a good question at the end of the episode. Like, if you could have a brass band piece written by any composer, who would
Well, that was
be?
my answer. So
okay. So that I guess that is officially our question of the episode then, isn't it?
Oh, I thought the question was going to be, I was going to say, who could Taylor Swift date to bring as much attention to brass banding as she brought to the Kansas City Chiefs? But we can roll with yours. It's just probably better anyway.
That's an interesting question too.
Because also most of the people I'd probably say are also married. So
yeah. I don't think I want to get involved in that conversation at all.
I wouldn't, not while it's being recorded. No.
Although for the next tour, if you had a nice brass line from a brass band, maybe 6 to 8 pieces from a brass band, that brass band might gain.
He can afford an entire brass band. Let's be honest. We don't have to break them up.
That's one of those things I'm pretty sure they would go, "Hey, would you?" Because like Southern University played with Usher on that halftime show. They probably didn't get paid. Yeah, they probably didn't get paid for that. They were like, "Yeah, it's a great opportunity to play on the halftime show."
Well, there was
I wish they would have gotten.
Wasn't there a halftime show one year that they offered the halftime show to a big artist and they said, "Well, how much do you pay for it?" And they said, "We don't pay for this," and they were like, "No, I'm not doing it. I'm a professional musician. I get paid to play. I'm not going to do it." Boy, there's millions and millions of people that are going to watch this, and they're like, "I don't care. I get millions of people that watch me anyways." Sorry, I cut you off there, Pat.
I was going to say, I wish they would have publicized what band that was a little bit more, because I had a tough time finding out which group it was, and I almost thought there was no identifying things on the uniform, so I almost thought it was just a throw together group. The other thing about the Super Bowl halftime show is, I was kind of mentioning that we're hanging out with some brass band fans watching, and I'm like, think of all the time they spent putting this halftime show together for one performance. Who does that? And I was like, says the brass band.
Music. Yeah, it's true.
All right. So what are we searching for? Composers that are not in the brass band space that we would want to have write a brass band piece.
Live or dead. So
let's go. Yes, go. Let's do the gambit. Sure.
Yeah.
I think Omar Thomas right now. I would want to hear something from Omar because he's from JMU, so I feel like he knows what to do with a brass band. He just hasn't had to do it yet. I'm pretty sure.
Didn't Fountain City just do an arrangement of Come Sunday at Brass in Concert?
Yeah, but that's an arrangement of a wind band piece. I want him to do a full on test piece, 20 minutes of hurt.
I think that he could probably do that.
I could. Absolutely.
Well, so far my pick was Mahler, so I think your option is going to be easier to pull off than mine.
You think Mahler would be able to fit?
Would be one too.
Without any necromancy?
I can't do one.
If Mahler did a brass band test piece, it would last an hour.
Minimum. Yeah.
Hour and a half.
That does remind me.
To say.
I don't know if you heard, but there's like a relatively new Heaton variations. So he had finished, I think, like the first 8, and the last ones were just a sketch, and then they finished filling them out. There's like a documentary Paul Hindmarsh did with Foden's band on it.
Yeah.
So kind of need to see them finish that up. But...
Yeah.
Right. I think I wish I could see what Duke Ellington would do with a brass band.
Ooh.
That would be spectacular.
He did the Nutcracker Suite, right?
Yeah, he did the Ellington Nutcracker. Yeah, he did.
Yeah, just to see like something like that, like just knowing he did that to Tchaikovsky, I would love to see what he would do to brass band.
I would love to see what kind of colors he could pull out of a brass band. I think that would be spectacular.
The Ellington Year of the Dragon, that would be sweet. Make
it infinitely harder for all of us. I mean, I've been to some of y'all's Christmas concerts and heard you try to swing.
But even Ellington wrote spirituals. He wrote what, operas, ballet. I don't know if he wrote an opera. I don't know, but he wrote in so many different styles, and they were all so unique that I think that he would be able to really pull something cool, whatever style it came out in. I think that would be a really cool sound.
That's a really good one. That would work really well. What's yours, Pat?
I think I already told you anybody in Taylor Swift collaborating, but I think it's kind of funny whenever people ask my question, like, who do you think should be an adjudicator? Or what test piece do you think we should do? I'm always like, I'm not a music guy. Do you really want me making that decision? That's why I turn it over to those committees when it comes to NABBA. I just pretend to be, but I still think I'd love to hear something by John Williams.
I was thinking some of the film guys would actually be really good.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Howard Shore would probably crush it too. He did Lord of the Rings stuff. Like,
well, we do have some pieces by a film guy, Bruce Broughton. There are some pieces by him, and like I remember years and years ago, he did the Masters of Space and Time, which is a piece that I think if people went back and listened to it now, they would be like, "This is what people are writing now." He was so far ahead with that piece.
Well, that was supposed to be NABBA and the British Open, and they didn't do it. But then I think the National Youth Brass Band of Great Britain played it many years later, and people loved it when they finally heard them do it.
Yeah, I was one of the remember being one of the few people performing it that actually I just love that piece. It was so awesome and so much fun to play. And everybody's like, I don't like it. I don't like it. And I'm like, you guys are crazy. And now it's like the stuff that's being written now is, it's very similar to that in a lot of ways. And it's like, that piece needs a bit of research. We probably should pick that for NABBA again. That would be huge fun. I just don't even know what section it would be in now. Would it be first section now?
Everything's first section. That's the problem.
Everything's first section.
If you don't know, that's where it goes.
We're booked. Yeah. So that's crazy. Well, thanks for being with us on this, Pat. It's been awesome catching up on this stuff with you.
Yeah, I know. It's always good to catch up with you three, and hopefully we'll get to spend some time together in Huntsville in a couple months here. So
yeah, we're gonna try to do a physical one. Are we trying to do a podcast where we're all in a room together?
Oh, that would be something.
Without Amy having to go check in on kids and stuff.
The one where everyone's in the room together. Is that the title?
They are out in the snow, and they've been in and out. And I if you're not watching the YouTube of this, I keep turning my video off because they go in and out and they leave the outdoor door open behind me. And so it's like letting 30-degree air into the house. And I keep turning off my video and going, and then another boy will walk in and just leave it open. So that's what I've been doing if you're watching the YouTube version of this.
Well, unfortunately, I won't be at the championships this year, so you'll have to do a live version without me. Sadly.
We
We
might be
could-
able to find a replacement brass bander.
Yeah, there might be options.
There might be some options.
Well, Tony, have you missed a show yet? You've only missed like one, and I think even then you like showed up late, right?
Yeah, the one we had to redo
Yeah.
because somebody didn't record it correctly.
So you can get one off, I guess.
All of that Gourlay gold, was missed.
Yeah.
That's a curtain I'd rather not pull from and then show the backstage of that one.
Yeah. So I've been to most of them. So I guess I'll miss it. No, well, you guys did one live, or did one down in was it the Women's Brass Conference?
Oh yeah, we did one in Denton. That's right.
That's my favorite show opener that we have, because we were all just singing the opening song.
Except me, I'm just looking miserable. I don't handle secondhand embarrassment very well.
Well, that's cool. Well, we'll have to, figure out a summertime thing where we just all get together and get a whole bunch of people together. Maybe Dublin or something would be a good place to do that.
Come to the Ohio Brass Arts Festival at the end of June.
Yeah, that one. There's so many. There's so many of them in Columbus.
It's in Gahanna and Columbus,
which is real close to the airport, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Let me see here. Directions.
Did you stop the recording yet, Aaron?
No.